I will not be nitpicky at all about QB1, but I will tell you what I think he needs to improve on, and I'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Thanks for joining me, Tony Wiggins, here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. Also, a quick reminder that we are free to subscribe to on our YouTube page. Make sure you go on YouTube, you subscribe, you hit the bell so you can get those notifications, and also hit that like button as well. If you listen to audio podcasts, make sure you check in wherever you do that at every single day to make sure you don't miss an episode. Shout out to my everydayers. I appreciate you. The engagement has been, I would say, life-altering and life-changing because it makes me feel good to know that so many people listen every single day. And if you're new here, I hope you enjoy the podcast, and we'll call you an every day or two if you just come back every day. How about that? All right. Drop your comments, too, on the YouTube page, or hit me at Shop Talking Wig on X is what it's called now, and I will try to respond as much as I possibly can. I want to talk today about Trevor. All right, so let me tell you why this show is what it is today. It is what it is today is because I want greatness out of 16, and I think it's coming, right? And you run the risk a little bit of pissing people off just because you say he's not perfect. All right. But that's all right. We do that all the time anyway, so there's no problem. I expect the best, and I want greatness, right? And the thing about great players is that doesn't mean they don't have a bad game. What it does mean, though, is they don't have a hitch in the giddy up, and they don't have the same problem all the time. And the thing about Trevor, he's going into his third season. Some would say it's more like his second season. And there's this characteristic that he has that I think for them to elevate to where they want to go and where we all want them to go as a team, that he has to get past that. And what that is starting off slow in games. Now, I can look up the splits, but this is one of those things where stats might say the other thing. Stats might say, man, his splits are just as good over the course of his first two seasons than the rest of the games. And that might very well be true. But stats don't tell the whole story. My eyes tell me the story. And my eyes tell me that he needs to get off to better starts. Because it doesn't mean every single game, every single week. But the games that they seem to struggle in are games that he has a slow start and then he has that clutch gene. We'll talk about that clutch part. That is another element to being great, is that you can turn up when you need to. And he has shown the ability to turn up under adversity, some of which was created by himself, like if you go back to the Chargers game. So there's layers to it. Whenever you're trying to win and when you're trying to elevate, there's layers to that. And I believe one of those layers, that's the thing that he has to really, really work on, and that's getting off to better starts. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk in segment 2 about the clutch play already being there. And that's something that you don't know a young guy has until he shows you. And he has shown that over and over again that he has that. And why coming from behind all the time and getting off to slow starts, why at some point that could be exhausting and you can run out. I see it happen in basketball all the time where a guy will, or a team will be down and they'll use and exert all of their energy just to get back into the game and make the game, even maybe even take the lead. And then they'll lose by 10 points. It's because they exasperated themselves and they used up all of their energy and all of their emotions to make a comeback. And it's hard to stop other opponents from just making one play, right? The Jags got real lucky last year in the playoffs. I wouldn't necessarily call it luck. I'll just call it good fortune that they created by themselves, where they did not allow the Chargers to make that one play. because if the Chargers score a touchdown in the second half, the game is over. And they did not allow that. But that can be a little bit exhausting. So we'll talk about that in segment 3. What are the reasons for the slow start? Now, I know Trevor's cool and he's laid back, but so is Joe Burrow. There are guys that are cool and laid back, and they don't necessarily start the game cool and laid back. For me, if I'm taking a guess, I think he's so good and he trusts his ability so much that he tries a lot of stuff early in the game. I think he's always the late great Charlie Murphy called Rick James an habitual line stepper, right? Like he always. I think Trevor comes out every single week and say, "Let me see what I can get away with. Let me see what this arm can do. There ain't nothing out here I can't make." You know what I'm saying? He has the confidence, I believe, of one of those top 10 PGA Tour golfers where it ain't a shot. I don't care what bunker I'm in or if I'm in the rough, where's the green? I can get it there. And I really do think that sometimes he's his own worst enemy in that respect. And there are some things we'll talk about in segment 2 that I believe the team can do to help him through it. I don't think you take the ball or take the air out of the ball or take the ball away from him because he's such a great player. You want him and you want the opponent and you want his teammates to know, oh, no, we coming. And we coming out here, we throwing and we slinging that thing. The same way that you would do a Patrick Mahomes, that's what you have to do to Trevor Lawrence. But can there be some things in the game plan or can there be some things that will allow him to come out and get right and get acclimated to the game conditions? His issue has not been interceptions. Now, I know I forgot to tell y'all this too. The reason why I've been thinking about this for a while, and I was going to do this is one of my evergreen shows that I was going to do that had nothing to do with the current events. But with the pick that he threw where the ball slipped out of his hand, according to him and Doug Peterson last week in Dallas, and then I spearheaded the show today because early this morning in Detroit, he went deep into double coverage and got picked off by C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So my thing is, why? Why? The preseason, the workouts, the joint practices, this is where you see what you got, right? And what you can get away with. So I'm not that overly concerned about it. But when you look back to last year, a poor game against the Titans, and they still went to the playoffs and won the division, a poor first half against the Chargers. And that Chargers game is going to go down in history as one of those things that's it's bad and it's good, and it's more good than bad because they ended up winning the game. But sometimes you can learn a lot about a player in certain situations. And I think what we glean more positive stuff from the comeback victory and the way that he was able to overcome. But we forget about the fact that it is not sustainable for a quarterback to play half as bad as he played in the first half and still think you're going to get a good result. So we'll talk about it today. We'll there's no sunshine and rainbows here. There's also no panic because I do believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to show himself to be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. We ain't talking about that. We're talking about his greatness and how this team could be elevated to another level. I told y'all when we got Trevor Lawrence that I was going to be greedy. And part of being greedy is being constructive, right? And admitting what you see that needs to improve and not just having, a marshmallow by the fire. We ain't making s'mores here every day. We're just talking about facts and football, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence, some of the things that he can do, and why one of the things that he does very well, and that is play very, very clutch, especially when things are adverse. So we'll get into that in segment 2 on today's show here on Locked On Jaguars. But first, I have to tell you about today's sponsor, and that is Nutrafol. Man, I know everyone, if you're a man, you worry about hair loss. You worry about it. I know because I deal with guys every day in my other profession. I've been a barber for 30 years. They worry about that stuff. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Men think losing their hair is inevitable. Take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. If you're tired of weakening or thinning hair, do you want to reach your full hair potential? Leading hair growth supplement Nutrafol helps improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men. Enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, running it down here on Locked On Jaguars as we talk about QB1, Trevor Lawrence, today. I also appreciate everyone hanging in with me today. It's a little later edition than we normally do, but we got it in. I give it to you tonight before you start watching Thursday Night Football. It's a little disappointing. A little note I have to add to today's show, and that is that Dan Campbell said that he's not playing any starters. We're really going to ask this question at the end of segment 3, but I'm going to tell you what it is right now. We're going to really talk about this. If guys aren't going to be able to work against the starters, what's the point of the preseason? And why can't coaches come up with some better formula to get a real good look at what's going to happen? I don't think you can put guys in a bubble wrap, so I'll probably try to answer that question at the end of the show. But Trevor Lawrence, he's been able to show you that he has I'm going to say a clutch gene, at the risk of sounding like Skip Bayless. But a lot of the times when they're behind because of himself. Brett Favre was like that. Brett Favre would throw picks and had these wild throws, and all of a sudden he'd get deidied by people because they were able to come back. And my thing was always, well, Troy Aikman doesn't have to do that because they're never behind. And he's never responsible for getting them behind, right? You don't want, if you're Trevor Lawrence, if you're trying to elevate, remember, this is about being a championship level quarterback. You don't want to make a habit of always having to come back. You don't want to make a habit of always having to use those clutch powers that you have and putting other guys in a situation where they absolutely cannot make any mistakes. Because that's what happened against the Chargers. Guys had to do everything right in order for them to come back from being down 20 at halftime. Everything had to go in their favor. And for the Chargers, it was like everything that could go wrong did go wrong for them, right? And part of that was because the Jaguars made it happen like that. But I don't believe it's sustainable. And I also don't believe that it's something that a team that is going to consistently win championships can do long term. I think it's good that you can turn that thing up when you need to turn it up and do some extraordinary things when extraordinary things need to be done. But I also believe that faster starts would help this team get to the point where they can start dictating the game more and mixing and matching the way that they're going to attack on defense by being ahead, by getting out quickly. I don't know if you guys remember, but if you listen to this podcast last year, I always said that one of the things that they needed to do was get out front, get ahead, and so their defense can line up and do certain things. And then at some point I was like, I don't know when it was. It might have been the second half of the season or towards the end of the season. I was like, I said that was their formula, but guess what? They ain't done that. They were able to do it the other way. They were able to get behind, play sloppy early, and then make a roaring comeback and win a lot of games. And even the ones that didn't win, they came back and played pretty well. The game in Philly, when they jumped out and the Eagles took over and got a big lead, the Jaguars had the ball and it was a one-score game at the end of the game when Trevor Lawrence fumbled. So think about that. The Chiefs game in the regular season as well as the one in the playoffs. Got behind, and here they come. Here come these cardiac cats is what, we'll call it. Here they come. They're coming. and they never quit. So while it displayed good character and that clutch play late in games showed you that they showed you what they built. It's like watching your kid fight for the first time. I remember one of my sons ran home. I've told this story before, and he told me, Daddy, Deion's at the court. He's fighting this big kid. So I wanted to make sure the kid wasn't 19, right? My son at the time was maybe 10. The kid was like 15 years old. And the kid was like, Shorty, go ahead. I don't want to hurt you. And I'm walking up. And my son saw me out the corner of his eye. So right then, he just reached down and he Rocky Balboa. He swung as hard as he could. Bang. The other kid didn't see me coming and caught him with a 1-2, pop, pop, and pushed him up against the fence. So my son was going to lose, right? And I said, hey, break it up. What's the problem? The kid had my son's basketball or whatever, so I told him to give me the ball because he wasn't going to whoop me. And it would have been funny, though, if he would have. It looked like I would have got whooped like Red and his daddy did with Debo on Friday. It would have been funny. I go over there trying to be a hero, and that little 16-year-old boy whooped me, but that didn't happen. So I told my son, I didn't tell him, yeah, I saw you swung at him because you saw me coming. I told him, no, you did a good job. You stood up for yourself. You win some, you lose some, but at least you have the heart. And that's the point I'm trying to make about the Jaguars. Doug Peterson knows that they are not going to quit. They are a never give up, never quit bunch, and they're going to keep fighting. That's a good thing, knowing that about your football team. But if they want to elevate, they got to make sure that they play close to that way from beginning to end, because the championship teams, they come out of the tunnel with one thing in mind, to let you know as quickly as possible that you're going to have a long day. You're going to have a bad day. And all of that crap you tried and you studied for, it ain't going to do no good, dog. We're going to beat you. So think about on Saturdays, there's a handful of college teams that do that to people. In the NFL, it's a little bit different because anybody, like we said, Houston beat Kansas City last year. Or they didn't beat them, they took them into overtime, right? It usually, the disparity between the best team in the league and the worst team in the league is not like in college. We know there's some games in college, especially the ones that are going to come on early in the season. There's going to be some teams that's going to mollywop people and they're going to be up 50-0 at halftime. We know that, right? But there is an attitude that at the very least, even if the game's close in the NFL, that the favorite team usually doesn't diddle-daddle around and allow people to get out to big leads. And if they do, it's never always on the quarterback. In our situation, anytime the Jaguars have come out and started slow in games, most of the time it's been on Trevor. And that's a little tricky because I can say it's been on Trevor because the way this team has been constructed, everything was on his back. They were going to go as he went. He's the best player on the team. And they were learning their identity, and their identity was going to be through him. And when people were calling for Doug Peterson to run the ball more, he said, no, I'm not. Because long term, we are going to win based on the arm and the mind of number 16. And he's right. But we also won because of the heart of a lot of those players. And those players probably don't have that heart if they didn't have it in their mind that they had number 16, regardless of how he played early in the games. What I'm suggesting is we tap into all of those resources and we make it easier on the help to help. And the way that you do that is, how can we get 16 to come out and play better early? It's not nerves. It's not fear. What I think it is it's supreme confidence, and he wants to do well so bad that sometimes he sails passes early in the game. How can they calm him down? I'll tell you in segment 3 how they can do it. And I'll also go over this preseason narrative that I know is going to start because they got some guys banged up in Detroit. Hopefully it's not that serious. Seems like the most serious one is right tackle Anton Harrison with a shoulder. You never know until you get it looked at what's going on. But he couldn't really work all the kinks out. We'll talk about that too. in just a second here on Locked On Jaguar. All right, third and final segment. Let's tie all this together. We talked about why coming from behind can be exhausting on the defense. We talked about the fact that a good thing that has been displayed and what we've learned about this team, that even when they do have slow starts, they have the clutch DNA to be able to come back, and they believe they can come back. And most of that has to do with the fact that number 16 has the confidence of everybody on the team, and the importance of why Trevor needs to start early if this team is going to elevate. It's not like, look, the kid didn't play poorly. He had the 68% completion percentage, over 4,100 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 8 picks. One of the things about all of this that we've said is the more talent you give him, the better he'll be, because some of those overthrows won't be overthrows. I think that's true. I think and I believe that that is true. The more talented the players he's throwing the ball to, the more separation, the bigger the window, the less difficult the throw is. And then even if it is an off throw, you got a guy like Calvin Ridley that can go get it. There were some plays last year. I sat right there with a former NFL coach, and he said a couple of times, why would he do that? Why would he do that? And I think that play and that thing that he did was, I think they went for it on fourth down. It was like 4th and 2. And Trevor gunned the ball 27 yards down the field and tried to make a hard throw. And I think he had a guy wide open in the flat. There was another play, one that's floating around on the internet, where he made one of the best throws all season of any quarterback into double coverage against the Titans, and it hit Zay Jones right in the hands, and he dropped it. But then there was a shot. There was a crosser. It wasn't even a shallow cross. It was a cross. Christian Kirk was wide open. And I made the point that I told people, I said, I bet you Doug told him to take Kirk. And everybody, all the quarterback coaches said, you don't know what you're talking about. The throw hit the guy right in the hand. Coaches have a tendency that even if something works, if it wasn't the right thing to do, they're still going to tell you and correct you. Because more likely than not, if you do the wrong thing, it's like playing poker and playing 7 deuce offsuit just because nobody raised your blind, if you know what I mean. And you get a 7 on the flop and nobody raises, everybody checks. And you dumb enough to hang in there, and then you get a 2, and now you got 2 pair. And then on the river, somebody beats you because they got a straight or a flush. And you sitting there with those ugly 2 pair of 7 deuces that you shouldn't have played anyway. That's the point. If you sit around with a bad hand long enough, guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to get burnt, even if it looks like you making it work. So we're not just talking about winning a few games. Everything that I'm talking about with Trevor Lawrence is because I want him to be great. I want him to be one of those guys that's in the GOAT of this era conversation. I think he has the talent to do it. And I'm not just saying this because I don't think somebody else is saying it. They are. To whom much is given, as much is required. And he has a lot. He has a lot of talent, man. And I think he wants to maximize that talent. And I think the people around him and the people on the team want him to maximize that talent, and you should too. You should too. Preseason injuries. I heard Josh Wells may have something nasty going on. That's the report from Detroit. He's not going to play. Anton Harrison won't play in the game. Guys getting a little nicked up, a little banged up. The first thing that everybody wants to say is get rid of the preseason and abolish the preseason. And then when you do that and a guy gets hurt in week 2, you're going to say, well, he pulled his hamstring because he didn't play in the preseason. There's really no way to avoid injuries in football. There will be a lot of people that'll tell you one of the ways to actually get injured is to play like you're trying not to get hurt. I don't think we need to jump to too many conclusions. I think they could go to 2 preseason games and just use the other 2 weeks as joint practice weeks. But when guys get hurt doing joint practices, what do people say? Oh, these joint practices stink and you can't learn anything from it. Well, the coach disagrees. That's why they schedule it. But the people in charge, how do you know as a listener or an observer that you don't learn or you don't get anything valuable out of the joint practice when they keep doing it? And they tell you every time that they do it, the reason they did it is because you get to see something different and you want to see how the guys respond when they do something different. And you get a chance to see that without accounting for anything. Another poker reference. You get the chance to see the flop without betting anything, especially if nobody raised. The games don't, you go up and have a bad day, it doesn't count. How many times will a team be able to play another team and simulate some sort of live game action? And then at the end of the day, all you got from it is knowledge about yourself, about your players, about how they respond to a different situation. Yeah. So I'll leave it up to those coaches if they keep doing this stuff and they keep doing joint practices, if they think it's worth it, then who am I to say it isn't just because a guy gets banged up? I don't know how anybody could make that assessment. We're going to go through it all tomorrow, though. We'll get more information after we hear what Doug Peterson has to say about the guys that are banged up. We'll make that a big part of what we'll talk about tomorrow. And then do a game preview, of course, of the Jaguars against Detroit. Until then, you guys make sure you make your next watch Locked On NFL. It's a daily podcast that is outstanding, especially on Wednesdays, because that's the day that me and James Rapine host that show. But every single day, you can subscribe for free on YouTube. Same situation, and wherever you get your podcast, make sure you check it out. The guys do a really, really good job on that. All right, till next time, you guys take care of yourself and take care of each other.